Bucky Irving is a must start, but you might be able to consider benching Breece Hall in your championship lineup this weekend. We talk through the hardest start-sit decisions for Week 17 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. We're here for you every day, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. Now, you might have just one more matchup to go, and we're going to get you that trophy. If you're new here, I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL.com.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. How many finals are you in, Michelle? I got 3 this weekend, so I'm very excited about that. It's been a fun season, but need one more game. It's all meaningless to me. What came before if I don't win this weekend?
I know. I'm actually had really good luck this year. I'm in all 4 of my finals for my redraft league. So I'm not a great start with one of them. I had Miami Fairbairn, who scored a cold 0 points for me. So really excited about that one, but hopefully I can make a comeback there. Now we're going to help people make those tough decisions that they have to make this week at each position. We normally go through like our rankings for everything, but at this point, you've had the guys that brought you there. So those top players, you're gonna start them, right? They've been so good for you. There's not really a question about it. You're not worrying about matchups. They're in your lineup. But then there's some tougher decisions to make. So let's start with the running backs. Before we get to that, I want to let everyone know that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right. I think the toughest decision of the week is Breece Hall, right? Because he's a big name. And if you've made it to the finals and he's been in your lineup, you might say, I need to just stick with him, right? Because of how good we know he can be. But he's not doing it, right? He even played 76% of the snaps last week, put up 11.5 fantasy points. The Bills, you can run on sometimes, but I'm just not feeling good about him this week.
Yeah, there's a lot on the line. I know the Bills cannot catch the Chiefs anymore after the Chiefs beat Michelle Steelers, unfortunately. So now it's the number 1 seed's out of reach for the Bills. So they're just trying to stay ahead of whoever can win the North. So, I mean, there's not a lot for the Bills to play for. That said, I think they want to tune up well. It's a division rivalry game. They're at home. Again, Breece Hall is more hurt by the Jets than anyone else. Like, this matchup on paper is really good for Breece Hall, but they've been lukewarm on his usage. Maybe they don't like some things that are going on behind the scenes. Maybe Aaron Rodgers has kind of controlled his availability on the field. So there's all these things that have kind of made us scratch our heads on why they wouldn't just unleash their best player when he's healthy. So I don't know, maybe there's some lingering effects from what just happened and when he had to miss the game just a couple weeks ago. So I don't know. I think if I have any decent volume player that I can put in over Breece Hall, I'm going to go there this week. I think you look at a Bucky Irving for sure. I have Breece Hall at 14 only because he's Breece Hall, but I've dropped him into the RB2s. I like Bucky Irving. I should have Jerome Ford a little bit behind Breece Hall, but actually, if I had to make that decision, I might go Jerome Ford because of his volume and trust that at least the Browns are getting him the ball. Like, there's some situations where the main guy is not getting the ball. So, and I don't know. Like, Breece Hall, the talent is there. If he has a big game and blows up on your bench, you might feel really bad if you're forcing in some other back. So, again, I would expect him to be an RB2, but if you're have some guys that are going to be workhorses that may be having tough matchups, I think you go there instead of Breece Hall.
Yeah, I have Jerome Ford over him. I have Chuba Hubbard. I have Zach Charbonnet if Kenneth Walker's out, which I don't know if we have that officially yet, but it seems like he's not going to play on Thursday night. And then Bucky Irving, who you brought up, I have him at running back 10. There's a very good chance. Like, you grab Bucky Irving late or off waivers, and instead of rolling with Breece Hall, maybe you take the chance on Bucky Irving instead. I mean, he went through that little down spurt, right, where he got injured, but that's really it. I mean, as soon as he came back, he's been great again. He put up 16 fantasy points last week in half PPR. We know he gets all the opportunities around the goal line, and he gets a great matchup against the Panthers where he had 25 carries for 152 yards and a touchdown against just in week 13. So I think Bucky Irving's a fantastic play, and I'm playing him over Breece Hall if I have to make that decision.
Yeah, and there's all these guys that have popped up, Ford or Irving. One guy we'll talk about in a minute is Rico Dowdle, but there's been a lot of guys to prove that the best running back theory is kind of that hero RB. Get one and find another, because that seemed to be the case with all my teams, whether it's Jonathan Taylor or Jahmyr Gibbs, someone like that I've had. Look, Taylor's been up and down, but if you got Jahmyr Gibbs or Joe Mixon or Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley, you didn't need to force it into a second running back, right? You could have got one of these guys, and that's kind of how my teams have succeeded here, that I was able to invest highly at wide receiver, get that top running back. So that's the same case. That said, I can't recommend Rico Dowdle this week. It didn't inspire me a lot last week against the Buccaneers. Zeke Elliott resurfaces to score a touchdown. The Eagles are right up there with the Ravens in erasing running backs, right? They have been so. And Chiefs. You put all these three teams together. If you play running backs against them, you have a queasy feeling that you could get next to nothing from that back. And I'm not inspired by his workload last week. I don't know what happened following the Panthers game. The Bucks didn't even win the game, so I don't understand what happened to Dowdle. But I can't play him. I have an RB26, only a flex play this week.
Yeah, I'm at RB25, and it's just because the other players I even hate more. It's not because I think Rico Dowdle is a good flex play option. Even last week, we saw his points come back down to life after. We have to recognize that 3-week span where he was solid, right? It's not like he was killing the world. He had 14 points, and then week 13, he had his 19 points because that's his one touchdown he scored on the ground this year in week 13. But those games were against the Giants, the Bengals, and the Panthers. 3 of the worst run defenses in the league, or just defenses in general. He had to face the Buccaneers last week, top 5 run defense, and it came crashing down with just 6.6 points. And another tough matchup against the Eagles run defense, which we saw him earlier this year play against them. He had 15 touches in that game against the Eagles and put up only 8.6 fantasy points. And that was in full PPR as well. And he had 3 receptions there. So even fewer in half PPR and like nothing in standard. So I'm not expecting much from Rico Dowdle at all this week. And I really don't want him touching my lineups.
Yeah. And when we have this much of body work, we're near the end of the season. The run defense rankings do not lie. Like, these teams are legit good against the run. It's not like the Bengals, right? We're terrible early. We're a little bit better in the middle. These have been the best and worst all season long. Now, speaking of which, I'm going to go after Tank Bigsby a lot in lineups this week. And he could be a good DFS play. I'm not saying he's going to be Jonathan Taylor against the Titans. I'm not going to say that. But he's definitely shown a lot more juice and kind of determined running this year than Travis Etienne Jr. down the stretch. When things have fallen apart, the Jaguars have been bad and not very good, and Trevor Lawrence has not been out there. I've seen a lot more out of Bigsby that I like than I've seen from Etienne, and I think the Jaguars also have eyes, and they can see the Bigsby's hard running versus Etienne just kind of fading and not being healthy. So I love Bigsby against the Titans. What I like on this game is the fact that neither of these teams are going to run away and hide from each other. They can stick with their offense. So I really like a lot of assets in this Jaguars-Titans game. And sometimes it comes down to 2 bad teams playing each other to really give us good fantasy value when we need it versus these marquee games with better defenses on the field.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more worried about Tank Bigsby than you. I know people are going to be really excited because what Jonathan Taylor just did against the Titans. And, Bigsby got his touchdown last week. It is interesting. Bigsby's snaps are so low, but he still did get 12 carries. So it's like anytime he's on the field, he's running, which I don't know if that's a very smart offensive tactic to, pretty much give the game or the play away to defenses. But only 26% of the snap, 28% of the snaps over the last 2 weeks. And really, he has not scored more than 10 fantasy points in just one game since week 8. So it's not been great for Tank. Now, the Titans have allowed the most touchdowns to running backs this season. That's why I like Jonathan Taylor last week. So Bigsby could, of course, steal that rushing touchdown. I still think he's probably, even with that rushing touchdown, going to get 10 fantasy points max. So I'm not dying to get him into my lineup, but I would rather go with him over Rico Dowdle because at least he has a much better chance to steal the touchdown. We are going to pivot now to the toughest wide receiver decisions you have to make this week because there's some big names that have been highly disappointing lately. So it's like, can you trust them in your lineup in such an important week? We will let you know if we think you should right after a quick break. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've saved a ton. Actually, this morning, I just saved $18 a month by using Rocket Money. Don't want to brag, but plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Let's get into the toughest wide receiver decisions of this week. And I think the number one guy we have to discuss is Courtland Sutton, because he's been disappointing the last 2 weeks after having a really nice stretch where he's seeing a ton of targets and putting up great yards. Last week, he sees just 6 targets, 5 receptions, 50 yards. The week prior, 3 receptions, 32 yards. He did come down with a touchdown, but he gets such a great matchup against the Bengals that I'm going to have him as a top 15 option this week. I do think he ends up having a nice game in what should be a very high scoring affair between the Broncos and Bengals, both teams needing a win in this matchup.
Yeah, I have him at 18, which is pretty good here for Courtland Sutton. I mean, he's been well over expectation all season long because Bo Nix has been a lot better. Bo Nix can be up and down. He might have hit a rookie wall where he's been inconsistent, and I think that's been all season long. 22 TDs to 11 interceptions here. Sometimes he makes Courtland Sutton the focal point. Sometimes he just spreads it around to random guys. The Bengals have been a little bit better on wide receivers, but they've also faced some really garbage teams. So you're right. The Bengals and Broncos, they're going to be motivated. The Broncos really need this game. Now they can fall back on week 18 when they're going to be facing the resting Chiefs to get in the playoffs, but I don't think they want to do that because the Chiefs could want to spoil their season and get them out of the playoffs. So they need to win this game to take care of business, get rest of themselves, get in the playoffs. And the Bengals are going to give them their best shot. We know Joe Burrow is going to be on fire here. So there's going to definitely be some passing volume because also the Broncos running game, I don't have a lot of faith in them against an improved Bengals run defense of late here. They don't really have anyone that scares me with their usage. So I think they're going to have to put it up quite a bit. I could see Bo Nix throwing 40 times. And if he does, that's going to be a good game for Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, don't let anyone tell you that the Bengals defense has improved. Like they've played the Titans and the Browns with Dorian Thompson-Robinson the last 2 weeks. When the Bengals have faced a team with a winning record this season, they've allowed 36.4 points per game and 415 total yards per game to those opponents. That's the most and the second most in the league. So, and they're 0-7 in those games. So the Bengals defense against good teams, so bad. Now, so you're plugging Courtland Sutton, I think is what we're saying. We like him. Now, Cooper Kupp, on the other hand, it's been even way worse for him than Courtland Sutton. Over the last 2 weeks combined, he has 3 receptions for 24 yards. Now, this is a nice matchup for him. The Cardinals have allowed the 4th most receiving yards to slot wide receivers this year, 2nd most receiving touchdowns to slot wide receivers. And the guys who have been having good games against the Cardinals as of late, like JSN, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson. I mean, Justin Jefferson does great against everyone, but like those shifty guys that is like a Cooper Kupp, right? So I do think he has a nice matchup, but it's definitely risk to put him in. Where do you have him at this week, Vinny?
Yeah, I think you play him this week for sure. I mean, he also has a great history against the Cardinals. He can make a career out of playing that team, I think. And you're absolutely right, Michelle. They have struggled covering his position. And the Rams are going to be in the playoffs, it looks like, and they're going to win the division. So guess who they need to get going if they have any chance of making a run? It's Cooper Kupp. And they know Puka Nacua is fine. Kyron Williams is fine. The defense is playing well. I just think in this matchup, you're going to have an opportunity to get him going. It's at home. There's going to be no weather. The Cardinals stink. They're going to have to pass it well. I think Matthew Stafford also rebounds for the last 2 weeks, which were not very good against the 49ers and Jets. So all those things add up to Cooper Kupp being a much more viable wide receiver 2 play this week. I'm at 24 to be conservative, but I could see him finishing much higher than that.
Yeah, I have him at 23, so we're very close. I do think he bounces back this week. So we think Sutton and Cook bounce back. Sutton and Cook. Oh my goodness, can't say his name. Now, a guy I don't think is going to bounce back. It's Devonta Smith, and there's multiple things working against him, right? Cowboys defense, they have good corners. He just played against them in week 10. He had 2 receptions for 14 yards. Yep. And now we don't know who the quarterback is going to be for the Eagles. Like, Jalen Hurts has not progressed throughout the concussion protocol yet, so there's a solid chance he has missed. They bring in Ian Book because now even Kenny Pickett is dealing with the injury too. If it's Kenny Pickett, I'm fine with A.J. Brown, right? I still wouldn't love Devonta Smith here, but Ian Book makes this whole offense very, very scary. Now, you're still going to play A.J. Brown, but Devonta Smith, I just don't think you have to risk it with him. He just isn't that, like, game-changing player to risk putting him into your lineup that can just destroy you.
Yeah, I have him as wide receiver 3 at 28 right now, but he might come off the board for me. I mean, Brown, I think you have to lower him a little bit, too, because Kenny Pickett / Ian Book could make it brutal for this Eagles passing game. What they could do is hand it off to Saquon Barkley 45 times and hope for the best to beat the Cowboys. And look, it's getting real for the Eagles, because if he misses the game and the Commanders are able to beat the Falcons, then that division is going to come down to the final week, which we never saw coming. So, again, I think there's going to be a run-heavy attack. Kenny Pickett to really spread the ball around, which could help Devonta Smith, but what hurts Devonta Smith, it could be a really big drop-off from his buddy Hurts. And we haven't really seen this offense without Hurts since the Carson Wentz days, so I'm a little nervous for sure.
So would you go with a guy like Calvin Ridley over Devonta Smith? Because I have Ridley ranked a good amount higher than Devonta Smith this week. It's not like his targets have been great with Mason Rudolph, but Mason Rudolph is just a guy that's willing to throw it deeper. He's a little bit safer than Will Levis. I know he still threw 3 interceptions last week, but against this Jaguars defense, I do think Mason Rudolph will be able to get it done, and Calvin Ridley will be the top receiver for them. So I think he comes down with a touchdown in this game, and I would much rather risk it with Calvin Ridley with Mason Rudolph than with Devonta Smith with Ian Book or Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, Sutton, Kupp, Ridley, easy plays over Devonta Smith. Now, there's a chance that you might get Juwan Jennings and Deebo Samuel going as well. I mean, Deebo Samuel did score last week, so I like actually these 2 guys. I had Deebo at 32 to be conservative, but I know his quarterback is going to be Brock Purdy. I think he would be a much better play than Devonta Smith at this rate as well, because they're playing the Lions and that depleted defense. So I do quite a bit like the 49ers duo to both come through. It doesn't happen very often. It's usually one or the other, and George Kittle gets his, but what do you think about the 49ers this week? I mean, the Lions defense is so bad in the secondary, I think. And you also think there's going to be some volume here because the Lions should score the 49ers.
I mean, yeah, the 49ers don't have a running back right now, right? So they're going to be passing a ton in this game. They're going to have to keep up with the Lions offense that they're going to put up points. And I really like Juwan Jennings in this game. Deebo is hit or miss. He's been mostly all miss this year, but he had they were trying to get him involved. Now they are trying to up his trade value, right? I think that's why they're using him. And he did look like he was putting in more effort last week. Like, he looked like a different player last week. So I do think Deebo Samuel is playable. Now, Juwan Jennings, though, I think is a really, really good play this week. And I am playing him 100% over Devonta Smith and guys like that. The last 4 games, it hasn't been a great stretch for Jennings or this offense, but they played in a snow blizzard in Buffalo. They played in a rain out game against the Rams. And then last week he got Jalen Ramsey in the one game of this last month where he played in good weather and not against Jalen Ramsey. He put up 24.5 fantasy points. He had 90 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Prior to that rough stretch, he had 93 yards in week 10, week 11. He had 91 yards and a touchdown. Like, I do think he's going to get the targets in this game and have a really, really big game against the Lions. So I like Juwan Jennings a lot. I think Deebo Samuel is worth the risk. And we're going to talk about Brock Purdy, but he's one of my favorite plays of the week. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up that W. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which player will score a touchdown. By the way, that's Keenan Allen tonight against the Bears. Who will score the first touchdown? That's a lot harder to figure out, but that's a fun one. How many yards a player will have, how many points each team will score. Like, the list goes on and on and on of different options that you can bet on for these games. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so if we love Juwan Jennings and we like Deebo Samuel, and obviously we're going to love George Kittle, that means we think Brock Purdy is going to have a pretty good game. Like, the 49ers offense has not been good. They've not been gelling, but Brock Purdy has still put up 21 and 22 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 weeks. And he didn't do it against the Rams in the pouring rain. But when he's in good weather, he puts up fantasy points. This Lions defense is so banged up, and we know the Lions are going to score a lot of points, which means Purdy's going to have to throw a ton. So I really like Brock Purdy in week 17.
Yeah, I mean, I have a number 9. I mean, just because the regular usual suspects are ahead of him, right? So when I look at that, I mean, that's pretty high for Purdy as a pocket passer. Again, he's going to get the job done. I think you look at 2 touchdowns at least for him. I think he's going to have to push for at least 275 yards in this game based on the state of their running game at this point. So 275 and 2, I think, is maybe the floor for Brock Purdy this week. So I think there could be a lot of big quarterback performances, better than what we maybe saw from the non-stars here early in the week. But I do quite a bit like Brock Purdy. I agree with you. Easy top 10 play for me.
Yeah, he's my quarterback 7, and that's including with Jalen Hurts if he plays, because Hurts is my quarterback 5. So if Hurts is out, then Purdy's going to move up to 6, only behind Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, and Jared Goff, who he's facing against. So as much as I love Brock Purdy, a big reason why I like Brock Purdy is because I think the Lions offense is going to put up a lot of points, which means Jared Goff likely scored a lot of points too. But Goff has been on fire. He's been the quarterback 5, quarterback 2, and quarterback 3 in fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. So if I had to choose one between Goff or Purdy, I'm sticking with Goff, but I do expect both to have really good games.
Yeah, I'm not hot on Goff. I know that cold weather thing happened, but if you look at the 49ers history this season, they've been rather stingy on fantasy quarterbacks here. And you look at the last couple of weeks, it's been rough. I mean, I know there was rain involved, but they still did their best there to contain Matthew Stafford. And then last week, I didn't get a good game from Tua at all against them. So I think this is what's going to happen. I think the Lions are going to have to smash this game with a running game. The 49ers have kind of faltered there, and I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a centerpiece of what they do this week. But yeah, the Goff big games, I mean, you look at the 49ers, again, not a lot of big quarterback performances for them in fantasy going up against them. So when you look at that, I mean, I know Goff is a little bit different because a lot of his success is based on running game, but when you look at some of the coverage numbers here for the 49ers, it could be a little harder than expected. Now, I'm not saying Goff can't be good, but I look at it more like maybe 150 and 2 or something like that from him this week. I'm just saying, you look at the volume and the numbers for the 49ers, they're not as a smash as we would like to be, even if their perception of the defense is that they've slipped a little bit this season.
Yeah, the Lions have so much to play for. Oh, the 49ers. I mean, Purdy still has something to play for, right? Like, he's playing for his contract. But that defense, you know, they're banged up on the 49ers side. There's not a lot of play for with them. And you just kind of saw their heart wasn't in it last week after they got eliminated. So I think both of these guys are good plays. Maybe Purdy is the safer option here playing at home. Now, Purdy or Kyler Murray, I think that's a pretty easy question for me. Kyler Murray's not a guy I want in my lineups. I know he actually ended up coming through with a fine fantasy performance last week. So there's a good chance you have him on your roster if you played him, because you likely won with him. But the Rams defense, they're young, but they're coming together, actually. We just saw them shut down the Jets offense. I'm worried about Kyler Murray in this matchup, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, a part of my ranking high was the cheat code running. I think he's going to have to do more of that this week. And B, he did have a very good game. I know it's a different Rams defense. They were much younger, not having the same experience early in the season, but he did have one of his best passing performances against this Rams defense earlier. So I'm having a little bit more faith in him than you do because of running. That's why I simply have one spot ahead of Purdy. Again, Jalen Hurts has also been factored for me. So they're pretty equal to me. Murray's running maybe just gives him a little bit of edge for me in the matchup in no weather there in Los Angeles this week.
And then Jordan Love, he's a tricky one, right? He has not finished as a top 12 quarterback since any of the last 5 weeks. And that was the next greatest performance was quarterback 11 on the week. He hasn't finished as a top 10 guy since week 6. It's been a long time since we've seen a big performance out of Jordan Love. Now he gets to face the Vikings, who you can pass on, and it's going to be harder for Josh Jacobs to run on and get all of his rushing touchdowns he's used to. And when he faced the Vikings earlier this year, put up 4 touchdowns, nearly 400 passing yards. He also had 3 interceptions, which led to them falling behind in that game greatly and having to throw a ton. What do you think about Jordan Love this week?
I do like him quite a bit. I think they need him to perform well. Again, you mentioned the Jacobs matchup. It's not very good for the running game against Minnesota. I'm not saying Jacobs gets shut down, but I don't think Jacobs is going to pilfer the touchdowns. I kind of also like the weapons this week. Romeo Doubs, I think, is a sleeper. Last game, Dontavian Wicks went off. I don't expect that again. But between Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and Tucker Kraft, I think there's some paths to some really good numbers here for Jordan Love. So, I mean, I don't have him as high as the others. I'm at 10. So I basically have Murray, Purdy, Love in that order, 8, 9, 10. If I was making decisions, it's pretty clear there how I'm going with those 3. So, again, Jared Goff, I'm just fading in relation to these 3. Again, I'm looking a little bit about the defensive matchup. But, yeah, when you look at this matchup with the Vikings, it's clear. You can throw on the Vikings. You can't run on them, do much else. You got to accept the turnovers that also could come with those numbers. It could be another big sloppy game for Love, but you're just looking for him to compile. And again, the biggest reason that Jordan Love has not done what he's doing last year is the touchdowns, and he's just been inconsistent. And he's not getting those rushing cheapies that he got last year to kind of pad his stats. So that's been the biggest difference this year, just getting the ball in the end zone and having a very inconsistent, really, receiving core all season long.
Now, one guy we both really like this week is like a sleeper guy, but he's both in our top 12. It's Anthony Richardson against the Giants. We actually both have him as our quarterback 11 this week. Since being like unbenched, right? He's played 5 games since then. Yeah. He scored at least 20 fantasy points in 3 of those 5 games. He has 5 rushing touchdowns during that span, a season high 70 rushing yards last week. And the Giants have struggled against mobile quarterbacks, and not even very mobile quarterbacks. Like Geno Smith had a career high 72 rushing yards in his game against the Giants this year. Joe Burrow put up a season high 55 rushing yards against the Giants this year and scored his only rushing touchdown of the season against the Giants. Lamar Jackson had his typical 65 rushing yards against them in week 15. Like, that's nothing like crazy, but he destroyed them through the air. So it's not even like he needed to use his legs. He threw for 5 touchdowns against the Giants. But Anthony Richardson's a really sneaky high ceiling play this week.
Yeah, they're starting to cook this Colts offense finally. I mean, maybe Shane Steichen's put it all together with Richardson and Josh Downs and Taylor, and you've seen the numbers really add up, and they were just moving the ball at will last week against a really bad Titans defense to get a really bad Giants defense. And the Giants struggle with the 2 things that Anthony Richardson does well: stopping the run, stopping the deep ball, playing off the run, and the traditional running game. So the Giants defense is going to be totally confused when they do the zone reads and play between the 2 runners here and the downfield passing to Josh Downs. You can even see Michael Pittman make a play downfield in this game. That's how pathetic I think the Giants defense is. And the Colts, look, when you look at the pecking order, we talk a lot about the Bengals and Dolphins, but they're the ones kind of just hoping for the Broncos to falter. They didn't get it done by themselves. But again, this team would be interesting if they make the playoffs, where I didn't think there was any chance of that happening.
It could get real spicy here. Now, would you go with Bo Nix or Anthony Richardson this week? I have them back to back, and so do you. But I have Bo Nix at 10, Anthony Richardson 11. You have Richardson 11, Bo Nix 12. But if you really had to make the decision, right, in your fantasy lineups, which one would you go with?
I would go with Richardson. I just think there's ways he can put up numbers. Again, I know Bo Nix has been pretty active running, but I think Richardson could take over a game running, right? We haven't seen that yet, but you've mentioned all those rushing totals against the Giants. I mean, he's going to take off and run or throw deep. And again, if he does either of those things against the Giants, he's going to have a ton of success. Where I think Bo Nix, you just have to be worried. It's on the road. it is still a tough spot for a rookie. I know Richardson's in year 2. He's essentially a rookie for missing all that time, but at least he's playing a team that's kind of quit the Giants.
Yeah. Now, quickly here with tight ends, Jonnu Smith had a little bit of a down week last week, but still, I mean, he caught all 6 of his targets for 62 yards. It wasn't terrible in a tough matchup against the 49ers linebackers. He's right back into your lineup, right? He gets the Browns this week, allowing 9th most fantasy points to the tight ends this season. But if you had Jonnu Smith or Sam Laporta, which a lot of people might, right? Because Sam Laporta was disappointing for a while. Jonnu Smith didn't break out to the middle of the season, so you grab him off waivers. If you had to choose between Jonnu Smith or Sam Laporta against those 49ers, which one would you go with?
Oh, this has been really hard. I actually have Laporta at 4 because it's interesting. Laporta gets the matchup that we were worried about with Jonnu just last week, and Jonnu came through. But I think it's that kind of game for the Lions where Laporta, kind of the grinding game. I don't know if they're going to have a lot of wide receiver downfield success. And typically when Jameson Williams goes off, Laporta doesn't also go off at the same time. So I think it's going to be one of those gritty games, playing off the run and play action. So Laporta, I think, gets in the end zone. I mentioned that Jared Goff could have low passing volume and get a couple touchdowns. I think one or both of those could go to Laporta this week easily. So I do like Laporta. I mean, Jonnu, you look at, Cleveland kind of stinks as well, but I just trust what you'll get here in Laporta a little bit more than Jonnu, and it really may come down to the touchdown.
One guy I'm not getting worried about because we're at the end of the year now, but one guy I don't think I could trust in my fantasy lineups is TJ Hockenson. It's not like the matchup is super hard. The Packers are 11th in points allowed to tight ends, allow the 9th most receptions to tight ends, but he's just not really that involved in this offense. The last 4 weeks, he scored 4 points, 6 points, 7 points, 3 points. So it's like they don't really need him because Justin Jefferson's going off. Jordan Addison has stepped up. Aaron Jones is doing his thing as a runner. It's like if you had to get crazy here and go with TJ Hockenson or a guy like Chig Okonkwo, who has been getting a ton of targets from Mason Rudolph, he has a great matchup against the Jaguars. Could you get crazy enough and start Chig Okonkwo over TJ Hockenson?
No, I'm not. I am starting Chig Okonkwo over Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid this week in championship games, by the way. But I will say that Hawk is going to come to the table against the Packers. He has a good history against the Packers. They struggle against the tight end. It's hard to throw on them with their outside receivers. So I do like TJ Hockenson to come through this week. So I'm maybe just crazy, but I'm at 6 this week. So I'm being a lot aggressive with Hockenson, maybe thinking he's old school in this particular matchup in the division against the Packers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually have him at 7th this week. I just wanted to get your opinion. I do think maybe Hockenson step up. I do have Okonkwo though at 8. So I do have Okonkwo very high. There's a lot of tight ends I am worried about this week. And you mentioned Dalton Kincaid is one. Zach Ertz is one. I don't want to play him this week. Jake Ferguson has been pointless. Like Kyle Pitts, like you said, has been pointless. So there's some tough decisions here you might have to make. But if you have Hockenson, I think he has a solid chance to actually put up a somewhat decent game this weekend in that matchup. That is it for today's show. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We will be back tomorrow. I will be back tomorrow with my wife, Kate. We're going to discuss sleepers of the week and DFS plays. Vinny will be finishing off his cruise that he's been enjoying this week. We'll be back on Monday together where our audio will be a little bit better because you won't be in the middle of the ocean, which will help a lot. We will talk to you. We hope you the best of luck in tonight's game. Bye, y'all.